Christmas Eve has always been loud and crowded in my family, but that year something felt different the second I walked through the door. My name is John. I'm 27, and while I'm used to family gatherings being a mix of awkward small talk and passive-aggressive jokes, this night had a weird undercurrent I couldn't quite place. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon. The same decorations we'd had since I was a kid were hung up everywhere, and the dining room table was already overflowing with food. My cousins were buzzing with energy, whispering and giggling, and every time I caught one of them looking at me, they'd quickly look away. I brushed it off and tried to enjoy myself, but that uneasy feeling stuck in my chest. I sat at my usual spot near the end of the table, trying to tune out the overlapping conversations. My mom was in rare form, laughing too loudly at everything my aunt said, my dad holding court with my uncles at the head of the table like he was the king of Christmas. My younger cousin Mark, who was always the center of attention, was sitting across from me, fidgeting like he had something to say, but was waiting for the perfect moment. Dinner was loud and chaotic, just how my family liked it. Plates were passed, people reached over each other without asking, and the conversation jumped from topic to topic so fast it was hard to follow. I was halfway through my wine when my cousin suddenly stood up, clinking his glass with a spoon. "Everyone," he said, grinning like he'd just pulled off the biggest prank of his life, "I want to make a toast." The room quieted down immediately. "We all chipped in this year," he said, glancing around dramatically. "And we bought my parents a boat." The room erupted into cheers. My aunt's hands flew to her face. My uncle stood up and hugged everyone within reach, and half the table started clapping like someone had just announced an engagement. I smiled politely, but inside my stomach sank. I knew my aunt and uncle had been talking about getting a boat for years, but they never seemed serious about actually buying one. It was a nice gesture, sure, but something about the way everyone looked so smug about it made me uneasy. Then my mom turned to me, her face glowing with pride, or maybe just the wine, and said casually, "Oh, and we used your savings for the final payment. Hope you don't mind." It took me a second to process what she had just said. The table was still cheering, my cousin was bowing like he'd just performed on stage, and there I was, gripping my wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "What?" I said, my voice low enough that only the people nearest to me heard. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," my mom said, waving me off. "It was just sitting there, and this way it went towards something that benefits the whole family. You'll get to use the boat too." I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to say something, to make a scene, to ruin the Christmas spirit. My dad was already smirking like he expected me to throw a tantrum. My brother chuckled under his breath. Even my cousin, the one who made the toast, avoided looking at me, suddenly busy with his plate. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my hands on the table. Instead, I took a slow sip of my wine and set the glass down carefully. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed calm. If they thought I was going to embarrass myself in front of the whole family, they were wrong. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it, and placed it face up on the table. "You know," I said quietly, "I think it's time everyone saw this." The video started playing, and the laughter at the table slowly died down as people realized what they were watching. The room went silent except for the faint sound coming from my phone. My mom froze, my dad's smirk disappeared, and my cousin's face went pale. I didn't say a word. I just leaned back in my chair, let the video play, and waited. By the time it was over, the only sound in the room was the faint clinking of a fork someone had dropped. My phone started buzzing a few minutes later. Missed calls, messages, but I didn't pick it up. The silence after the video ended felt like it stretched for hours, even though it was only a few seconds. My cousin sat back down slowly, his earlier confidence completely gone, and my aunt stared at her plate like she could disappear into it. My mom was the first one to speak, her voice a little too high-pitched to sound casual. "John," she said, trying to laugh it off, "that was completely unnecessary. You're ruining the mood." I didn't answer. I just kept looking at her, calm, quiet, letting her squirm. My dad cleared his throat, clearly annoyed, and said, "You didn't have to make such a big deal out of it. We told you, it's for the family. You'll benefit from it too." "Yeah," my brother added from down the table, his mouth full of mashed potatoes. "You're being selfish. It's just money. You still live rent-free, so it's not like you needed it right away." That last line stung. Yes, I lived in the small apartment above my parents' garage, but it wasn't free. I'd been paying them a reduced rent since I got out of college, and that money was supposed to be going into a savings account for me. At least that's what my parents always told me. I'd trusted them with nearly 5 years of careful saving, and they had just taken it. My aunt finally spoke, her voice soft, but with that same patronizing tone she'd used my whole life. "Sweetheart, think of it this way. This boat will create so many memories for all of us. You can take your friends out on it, go fishing with your dad. It's really a gift to you too." I wanted to laugh. A gift? They had taken my money without asking, thrown a party to celebrate it, and now they were acting like I should be grateful. I glanced around the table and saw the divide clearly. Half of them looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze, while the other half were clearly waiting for me to apologize and move on. I didn't say I was upset. I said finally, my voice level. I just thought everyone should see what really happened. My cousin shifted in his seat, guilt written all over his face. The video I had played had been a recording I took last week, a conversation between my parents and my cousin where they discussed using my savings. My mom had laughed and said, "John won't mind. He never stands up for himself anyway." My cousin had hesitated, asked if they were sure, and my dad had said, "He's too soft to say anything. He'll sulk for a bit, then get over it." No one spoke after that. Dinner continued, but the energy had completely changed. The laughter was gone, replaced with a tense quiet broken only by the clinking of cutlery. After dessert, people started clearing the table, and I slipped away to the kitchen. I could hear my parents whispering in the living room, their voices sharp and low. "You shouldn't have played that," my mom hissed when she finally cornered me. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone." "You embarrassed yourselves," I said flatly. "I just showed them the truth. That money was sitting there doing nothing," my dad snapped. "We gave you a place to live, food, support. You owe this family something." There it was, the real reason. It wasn't about the boat. It was about control. They had always seen my savings as something they had a right to, something they could use when it suited them. I thought back to all the times growing up when my birthday money would mysteriously go missing or when my parents would borrow from me with no intention of paying it back. This wasn't new. I had just never called them out before. The rest of the night was a blur of awkward goodbyes and pointed looks. My aunt hugged me extra tightly and whispered, "Don't let this ruin Christmas for you," as if I was the one who had caused the problem. My brother smirked at me as he left, muttering, "Enjoy living above the garage for the rest of your life." After everyone was gone, my parents sat me down. My mom tried to soften her voice, tried to make it sound like a reasonable conversation, but every word was laced with manipulation. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "We just thought you weren't using the money yet, and this way it brings joy to everyone. Don't you want to make your family happy?" I stared at her for a long time before answering. "Not at the cost of my future," I said. "You're being dramatic," my dad cut in. "This is why we didn't ask you. You always blow things out of proportion. You should be thanking us for including you in something this big." I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that would make them see how wrong they were, and I was done begging them to respect me. I went upstairs to my apartment and shut the door, locking it for the first time in months. That night, I lay awake replaying everything in my head. Every comment, every look, every time they had dismissed me in the past. Birthdays where they forgot to get me anything, family events where my brother's accomplishments were celebrated while mine were brushed aside. The time my dad told me he was disappointed I hadn't gone into the family business. All of it was piling up in my mind, turning into something sharp and cold. Over the next few days, the phone call started. First from my mom, then my aunt, then my cousin. They all had the same message: stop making this a big deal. It's Christmas. Be mature and let it go. My dad finally texted me, saying if I didn't come down for New Year's dinner, I could start looking for somewhere else to live. That should have scared me, but instead it just made me angry. I had been saving for a down payment on a house for years. That money was supposed to be my ticket to independence. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken away my plan for my future. When New Year's Eve came, I didn't go downstairs. I stayed in my apartment, lights off, listening to the faint sounds of music and laughter drifting up through the floor. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from my brother. "Grow up. It's just money. We're all having fun down here while you sulk." I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. If they thought I was going to roll over and take it, they were wrong. That night was the turning point for me. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I was going to get my money back, and I was going to make sure they never dismissed me again. The days after New Year's felt strangely quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. I'd stopped going downstairs except when absolutely necessary, choosing instead to keep to my apartment and focus on work. If my parents wanted to punish me with silence, I was fine with that. I'd spent most of my life trying to win their approval, and it had gotten me nowhere. But by the second week of January, I noticed something off. My parents stopped leaving my mail on the little table by the stairs like they usually did. Packages I'd ordered didn't show up. At first I thought it was a mistake, but then one afternoon, when I was coming back from the grocery store, I saw my dad walking in with a stack of envelopes, including one with my name on it, and he didn't even bother to leave it where I could get it. He slid it into a drawer in the kitchen like it was his. That night, I went downstairs after they went to bed and quietly opened the drawer. My stomach dropped when I saw what was inside. My mail, stacked neatly. Bank statements. Tax documents. A letter from the bank confirming a recent withdrawal, a withdrawal I hadn't made. I grabbed the envelope and brought it back upstairs, my hands shaking. When I opened it, my fears were confirmed. Another chunk of my savings had been taken, not as big as the boat payment, but enough to hurt. The withdrawal had been made 2 days after Christmas. The next morning, I confronted them. My mom didn't even try to deny it. "You weren't doing anything with it," she said, completely calm, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Your aunt needed help with the marina fees for the boat, and it's technically family money." Family money? I could hear my voice rising, but I couldn't stop it. "That's my money. I worked for it. I saved it. You don't just get to take it because you think you know better." My dad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We've supported you for years. You wouldn't have been able to save that much if we hadn't given you a place to live. Consider this repayment for everything we've done for you." That was it. The moment something inside me snapped. I realized then that it didn't matter what I said. They would always see my savings, my future, even my independence as something they owned. They believed they had the right to take from me because they had given me a place to exist. I didn't say anything else. I just turned around and went back upstairs, my mind spinning. For hours I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the letter, thinking about all the ways they had taken advantage of me over the years. I remembered being 15 and getting my first job at the grocery store down the street, how excited I was to have my own paycheck. My mom had helped me open a savings account, and within months she had borrowed from it just until payday. I never saw that money again. When I turned 18, my dad convinced me to co-sign a small loan for my brother's car, promising I wouldn't have to worry about it. But when my brother stopped making payments, the calls came to me. I had forgiven them every time, told myself it was just how family worked. But this was different. They had taken years of savings, money I had been putting away for a house, and they didn't even feel guilty. The betrayal kept getting worse. A week later, I went to check my car, an old but reliable sedan I had fully paid off, and found a note on the windshield. It was from my brother, scribbled in his usual careless handwriting. "Borrowed your car. Don't be mad." I called him immediately, but he didn't answer. Hours passed before he texted back a blurry photo of him and his friends on the boat, laughing, my car parked in the background. "Relax, we're just using it for a few days. You don't go anywhere anyway." By the time he returned the car, it reeked of cigarette smoke and had a new dent in the passenger door. When I confronted him, he shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal. Dad said he'd cover it." My dad, of course, had no intention of covering anything. "You shouldn't leave your car where other people can take it if you don't want it used," my mom said when I told her how upset I was. "You don't need to overreact about everything." Overreact. That word echoed in my head for days. It all came to a head the following weekend. I came downstairs to find my parents, my aunt and uncle, and my cousin sitting around the table, going over a stack of papers. They went quiet the second they saw me, which was already suspicious enough, but when I glanced at the papers, my blood ran cold. They were looking at listings for my apartment. "What is this?" I asked, my voice icy. "We've been thinking," my dad said, like he was explaining something reasonable to a child. "It doesn't make sense for you to stay up there when you're not being cooperative with the family. We could rent it out to someone who actually contributes. It would be extra income for us, and maybe teach you some responsibility." "So you're evicting me?" I asked slowly, just to be sure I had heard him right. "We're giving you time to figure things out," my mom said gently. like she was doing me a favor. You can stay until spring, but by then you should have found somewhere else to live. Maybe this will motivate you to grow up a little. Something inside me went very still. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just nodded once, turned, and walked back upstairs. That night, I opened my laptop and started making plans. Real plans. I spent hours going through my accounts, taking screenshots, saving copies of every withdrawal slip, every statement, every text message. I contacted the bank to flag the unauthorized withdrawals. I changed my passwords, moved what was left of my savings to a different account they didn't know about, and started looking at apartments for rent. Not because I wanted to move, but because I wanted to be ready. The next morning, I overheard my parents talking downstairs. "He'll come around," my dad was saying. "He always does. This is just another phase." But they were wrong. This wasn't a phase. This was the last straw. From that day forward, I stopped talking to them unless absolutely necessary. I stopped leaving my door unlocked. I stopped sharing anything about my life. Every word, every action was deliberate now. I wasn't just going to move out. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had done and why they would never have this kind of control over me again. That was the moment everything shifted. The betrayal had burned away whatever was left of my patience, and in its place was something much colder, sharper, and more focused. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. The air in the house felt heavy, like every conversation was layered with judgment. Every glance was a test I was expected to fail. My parents didn't yell at me or slam doors. They just started treating me like a tenant they didn't like. Someone who was tolerated, not welcome. I'd hear them downstairs at night, laughing with my brother, planning boat trips, talking about how freeing it would be when they finally rented my apartment out to someone responsible. My mom's voice would carry up through the floorboards, bright and cheerful. "I already have a co-worker who's interested. She said she'd pay more than what John gives us. It's really the perfect solution." It hurt more than I expected. Not because I was surprised. I wasn't. But because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to admit. They didn't see me as family anymore. Not really. I was an inconvenience they were ready to cash in on. I spent a lot of nights just sitting in the dark, thinking about how I'd gotten here. I'd been the good kid growing up. The one who stayed out of trouble, got good grades, didn't talk back. I worked through college to avoid debt, saved everything I could, even moved back home to get ahead. And still, somehow, I was the one they treated like a failure. The lowest point came one rainy Friday evening. I had been in my room all day working remotely, barely eating, when my brother barged into my apartment without knocking. "We need the space this weekend," he said casually, tossing his jacket on my couch. "Me and the guys are crashing up here. We're doing a boat trip, and we need somewhere to stay after. Don't be weird about it." I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "You don't get to just take over my apartment," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He rolled his eyes. "Relax, it's one weekend. You act like you own the place." "I pay rent," I shot back. "Barely," he said with a smirk. "Dad already said it's fine." That broke something in me. I grabbed my coat and left without another word, walking out into the cold rain just to get away from them. I didn't even have a plan. I just walked for hours, letting the rain soak through my clothes, my shoes squishing with every step. By the time I made it back, my apartment lights were on and music was blasting. My brother and his friends had taken over the space, eating my food, using my stuff like it was theirs. I went straight to my room, locked the door, and lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I let myself really cry, not just out of anger, but out of exhaustion, frustration, and this deep, hollow sense of being alone. That night, something shifted. Lying there in the dark, I realized that staying here was slowly killing me. Every day I stayed under their roof was another day they felt entitled to my money, my time, my life. If I wanted things to change, I couldn't just wait for them to magically respect me. I had to leave. The next morning, I got up early and drove to a cafe across town with my laptop. It felt almost rebellious just to be somewhere they couldn't barge in on me. I spent hours looking at apartments, small studios, basements, even places that needed work. Anything that was mine and mine alone. I also started documenting everything. Every unauthorized withdrawal, every text from my brother bragging about using my car, every note or email from my parents about family money. I took photos of the dent in my car, the scratches on my furniture from the weekend they stayed in my place. I backed up all the bank statements to the cloud. It became a routine. I'd work during the day, and at night I'd plan. I stopped telling them where I went. I started quietly selling things I didn't need anymore. Old electronics, furniture, even a few collectibles I'd kept since high school. Every euro went straight into the new account they didn't know about. But even as I prepared, the emotional weight didn't lift right away. There were days when I'd just sit at my kitchen table staring at the wall, feeling completely drained. Days when I'd hear them laughing downstairs and wonder if I was overreacting, if maybe I should just apologize, let it go, pretend like nothing had happened. Then I'd remember the look on my mom's face when she said, "family money," like it was hers to control, or the smirk on my brother's face when he dented my car and didn't care. Those memories kept me moving forward. By February, I had found a small but decent one-bedroom apartment across town. The landlord was willing to hold it for me for a few weeks while I got my paperwork together. Knowing I had a place waiting for me gave me a strange mix of peace and determination. Meanwhile, my parents' behavior toward me grew colder. My mom started knocking on my door less and less. My dad barely acknowledged me when I came downstairs. When they did talk to me, it was about the apartment. "We need a definite move-out date," my dad said one morning over coffee, like he was reminding me of an appointment. "You'll have one soon," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. My brother, on the other hand, seemed to enjoy poking at me. He'd make loud jokes about my future room, or ask if I was going to take the garage door with me when I left. It was childish, but it worked. It made my blood boil every time. But I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I just kept preparing. It was lonely, yes, and it hurt to know I couldn't rely on my own family. But there was a strange power in the quiet. Every plan I made, every step I took toward leaving, felt like I was reclaiming something they'd tried to take from me. By early March, I had everything lined up: first month's rent, security deposit, movers booked. I hadn't told them anything. They still thought they had control over me, still thought they could decide when and how I left. And that's when an idea began to form, something bigger than just leaving quietly. If they were going to turn my life into a spectacle, if they were going to use my money and laugh about it, then maybe it was time they had to face the consequences. I wasn't sure how yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't just walking away. I was going to make sure they understood that this was the last time they would ever treat me like this. March felt like a turning point, not just because I had found a way out, but because for the first time in years, I was doing things entirely on my own terms. Every decision I made, every email I sent, every item I sold felt like I was taking pieces of my life back from them. The first taste of freedom came the day I quietly moved the last of my savings to my new, separate bank account. I'd been careful, small transfers over several weeks, so nothing would raise suspicion. When I finally logged in and saw the total sitting safely out of their reach, I felt a strange mix of relief and adrenaline. It wasn't as much as it should have been, thanks to what they had taken, but it was mine, untouchable. That same day, I got a call from a company I had applied to months earlier. It was a remote job, better pay, better benefits, and completely separate from the network of people my parents knew. The timing was almost poetic. I accepted immediately. Suddenly, the picture of my future started to sharpen. With the new job salary and the money I had stashed away, I could not only afford the apartment I'd found, but I could furnish it exactly how I wanted. Clean, simple, modern, no hand-me-down furniture from my childhood home. I started packing in secret. Not in cardboard boxes that would draw suspicion, but in storage bins I could stack neatly in my closet. Clothes, books, even kitchen items, all tucked away one piece at a time. By the middle of the month, my apartment was half empty, though you wouldn't notice unless you looked closely. Meanwhile, I kept my head down around the house. When my parents asked about my move-out date, I would just smile faintly and say, "I'm working on it." My calmness seemed to throw them off. They were used to me getting defensive, frustrated, emotional, not this quiet, steady resolve. And then something happened that almost made me laugh. My mom started trying to be nice to me. Not in a sincere way. More like she was trying to smooth things over before I left so she wouldn't look like the bad guy to the rest of the family. She'd leave cookies outside my door or send me texts like, "Made lasagna if you want some," smiley face. I didn't trust it, but I played along. I'd thank her politely, take the food, and go back upstairs. If anything, it made me feel even more certain about leaving. I didn't want crumbs of kindness. I wanted respect, and I knew they weren't capable of giving me that. By early April, I had signed the lease on my new place and set the move-in date. It felt surreal walking through the empty apartment for the first time, picturing where everything would go. The space wasn't big, but it had tall windows, sunlight streaming in, and most importantly, it was mine. No one could walk in without my permission. No one could tell me how to live. I threw myself into setting it up. I spent weekends buying secondhand furniture, refinishing it myself to save money. I found a cheap but sturdy desk online and spent an entire Saturday assembling it, smiling to myself the whole time. It felt like building a new version of my life from the ground up. With the new job starting, my schedule became more structured. I'd wake up early, make coffee in peace, and work from my new apartment a few days a week while waiting for the official move. My performance impressed my manager so much that within the first month, they hinted at a leadership opportunity opening later in the year. That little flicker of pride I hadn't felt in years came back. I was good at this. I wasn't the failure my parents liked to pretend I was. And here's the thing, I didn't tell them any of it. Not about the new job, not about the apartment, not about the move date. I let them keep believing I was scrambling. My brother even made a snide comment at dinner one night about how I'd probably end up in some sketchy basement apartment. I smiled, nodded, and let him believe it. Every day, the power dynamic shifted just a little bit more. They didn't know it yet, but they were losing control. The more control I took back, the more careful I became about how I planned my exit. I scheduled the movers for a day when I knew my parents would be at work and my brother would be out of town. I arranged for a locksmith to meet me at the new place that same afternoon, just to change the locks and make sure no one could show up uninvited. Even small victories felt intoxicating. The day I got my first paycheck from the new job, I went out and bought myself a proper coffee maker. Nothing fancy, but good quality, something that felt like an upgrade from the cheap machine I'd been using upstairs at my parents' house. It sat in its box in the corner of my new apartment, waiting for move-in day like a little symbol of the life I was about to step into. Meanwhile, my parents seemed increasingly impatient. My dad started leaving helpful hints, like brochures for shared housing or comments about how the rental market is tight right now. You might want to hurry. I could feel them circling, trying to push me before I was ready. But instead of feeling pressured, I found myself smiling. Because for the first time, I was ahead of them. By mid-April, everything was ready. All that was left was to tell them, on my terms. And that's when the second half of my plan began to take shape. Leaving quietly would have been satisfying, yes. But a part of me wanted them to know, really know, what they had done. I wanted them to see how far I had come without them. And I wanted that realization to sting. I started thinking about the video I had played at Christmas. How powerful it had been to make them sit in silence, confronted with their own words. Maybe there was a way to do that again, but bigger. I started combing through the files I had saved, organizing them into a neat, undeniable timeline. The withdrawals, the texts, the photos of the damage they caused, the casual remarks they'd made about family money. It was all there, and seeing it laid out in one place made me realize just how much I had tolerated over the years. I didn't just want to leave, I wanted them to understand they had lost me. And as move-in day crept closer, I found myself almost looking forward to the confrontation. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I wanted that moment, the one where I finally said everything I had been holding back for years. By the last week of April, I was packed, my new apartment was ready, and my move was scheduled. All that was left was the reveal. The final week before my move felt strangely calm, almost too calm. I had everything lined up, every detail squared away, and yet the house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My parents seemed to sense that something had shifted, though they still didn't know just how far along I was in my plans. 2 days before the move, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "We should give John's room to Mark," my mom said casually, as if I wasn't living just a flight of stairs away. "He's been looking for a cheaper place to stay, and this would solve our problem." "That's not a bad idea," my dad replied. "Once John's gone, we can repaint, raise the rent, maybe even start using that storage closet for ourselves. Might as well make the space work for us." Hearing them discuss my apartment like it was already theirs, like my leaving was just a business opportunity, didn't hurt the way it might have months ago. Instead, it solidified my resolve. They thought they were in control. They thought I'd leave quietly, embarrassed, maybe even grateful. They were wrong. That night, I sat down at my desk and pulled up everything I'd been gathering for months. The bank statements, the text messages, the photos. I organized them into a single, clean document with dates, amounts, and short explanations. No anger, no insults, just facts. It was damning. By the time I finished, I had a complete, undeniable record of what they'd done. But I wasn't done. The next day, I reached out to my cousin, the same one who had made the boat announcement on Christmas Eve. We hadn't talked much since then, but I knew he felt guilty about being part of the scheme. To my surprise, he agreed to meet me at a cafe. I figured you'd still be mad, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. I am, I admitted. But this isn't about being mad. I just need you to be honest with me. Did you know where the money came from when you made that toast? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I told them it felt wrong, but your mom said you'd be fine with it. I didn't want to be the one to ruin Christmas. I appreciated his honesty, even if it stung. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked. He blinked. Like a statement? Exactly, I said. Just the truth. That you were told they used my savings, that you asked about it, that they said I wouldn't care. After a long pause, he agreed. If it helps clear your name with the rest of the family, yeah, I owe you that much. By that evening, I had his written statement in my inbox, signed and dated. It was the final piece I hadn't realized I was missing, not just proof of what happened, but corroboration from someone outside the immediate household. Armed with that, I started planning the reveal. I decided it would happen the night before my move. My parents were hosting one of their usual Friday dinners, the kind where half the family came over, played cards, and stayed until late. I would go downstairs, stay calm, and drop everything in one go: the documentation, the cousin's statement, even a few short audio clips I had saved of my parents talking about teaching me a lesson. But I didn't just want to show them privately. I wanted it to be undeniable, unspinnable. So I drafted a short message, polite but pointed, that I planned to send to the family group chat right after the confrontation. Hi everyone, just wanted to share some context for what's been going on since Christmas. Here's a detailed breakdown of how my savings were used without my consent, as well as written confirmation from cousin's name that he knew about it. I thought you should all see it before hearing any version of events secondhand. No anger, no ranting, just facts that spoke for themselves. That week, I also got my finances completely in order. I transferred the security deposit and first month's rent to the landlord, confirmed the mover's schedule, and even set up utilities for the new apartment so everything would be ready the moment I stepped inside. The last piece of leverage came unexpectedly. My new job sent out an announcement to the entire team naming me as the lead for a major upcoming project. It was a big deal, a career milestone, and it meant my income would be even higher starting next quarter. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. But I knew that would be part of the reveal too. They'd spent months treating me like a burden, someone who was barely scraping by, and soon they'd find out I was doing better than ever, without their help. The night before the planned confrontation, I walked through my apartment one last time. The boxes were stacked neatly by the door, labeled and ready. The shelves were empty, the furniture pared down to what the movers would take. It didn't feel like my home anymore, and strangely, that didn't make me sad. I sat at my kitchen table and went over my plan one more time. Show them the evidence. Tell them calmly that I was moving out the next morning. Let them react however they wanted, but make sure everyone knew the truth before I walked away for good. I was nervous, of course. There was a part of me that wondered if I should just leave quietly, avoid the drama, start fresh. But then I remembered the Christmas toast, the smirk on my dad's face when he said I'd get over it, the note on my car windshield, the drawer full of my stolen mail. No, they needed to see this. They needed to sit in it, just like they had on Christmas Eve when I played that first video. When Friday came, I was ready. I put on a plain button-up shirt, nothing fancy, just neat and put together. I went downstairs when dinner started, sat quietly through most of the meal, waiting for the right moment. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm, almost bored. When dessert was served, I set my phone down on the table, just like I had at Christmas, and said, "Before we go any further tonight, there's something everyone here should see." Every head turned toward me. My parents froze. I tapped the screen, and the first page of the document appeared. This time, there was no nervousness, no hesitation. I was in control. And tomorrow morning, I wouldn't just be leaving this house. I'd be leaving this entire chapter of my life behind. The room went so quiet that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My parents exchanged a quick glance, and I could see the flash of panic in my mom's eyes before she covered it with a forced smile. "John," she said softly, "maybe this isn't the right time." "No," I said calmly, my voice steady. "This is exactly the right time." I turned the screen so everyone could see and scrolled to the first section, the bank withdrawals. Each line showed the date, the amount, and the balance before and after. It was neat, professional, impossible to argue with. "This," I said, "is my savings account, or what's left of it. These are the withdrawals made without my permission." My uncle frowned. "Wait, you didn't agree to this." "No," I said, "I didn't. And here's the best part." I tapped the screen again and played the short audio clip. My mom's voice, unmistakable, saying, "He won't mind. He never stands up for himself anyway." The sound of her own words seemed to drain the color from her face. My dad sat up straighter, his jaw tightening. "John," he said slowly, "you're making this a bigger deal than it is. This was about family, right?" I said, my tone even. "And here's proof that you made that decision knowing it wasn't yours to make." I opened the cousin's statement next, the signed and dated email he had sent me. Mark confirmed he asked if I knew about the money. He confirmed you told him I wouldn't care. He confirmed you laughed about it. My cousin, sitting near the end of the table, looked uncomfortable but didn't deny it. He just nodded once and said, "It's true. I didn't feel right about it then, and I still don't now." That seemed to land harder than anything I had said so far. My aunt opened her mouth like she wanted to defend my parents, but when she saw her son nodding, she closed it again. I wasn't done. I swiped to the photos of the dented car, the text from my brother bragging about borrowing it without permission. "And just in case anyone thinks this is just about money," I said, "here's the other part. Every time my property was used, damaged, or taken without my consent. Every message, every note. It's all here." By now, no one was touching their dessert. My mom looked like she might cry, my dad's hands were clenched into fists on the table, and my brother was shifting uncomfortably in his seat, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "This isn't about money," I said finally, letting the words hang in the air. "This is about respect. And you've made it very clear that you don't have any for me." My dad opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you that I'm done. I'm moving out tomorrow morning. The movers will be here at 9. I've already changed my bank accounts, set up my new place, and transferred my remaining savings somewhere safe. There's nothing left here for you to take." The silence was deafening. My mom tried to recover, her voice trembling. "John, you can't just leave like this. We're family. We can work this out." "No," I said quietly. "We can't, because working it out would mean you admitting what you did was wrong. And I don't think you're capable of doing that." I stood up, slid my phone back into my pocket, and looked around the table. "Just so there's no confusion, I'll be sharing this with the rest of the family tonight. Everyone deserves to know what really happened." And then, before anyone could respond, I walked out. I could hear the low murmur of voices behind me as I climbed the stairs, my aunt whispering to my cousin, my dad swearing under his breath, my mom saying something about, "How could he do this to us?" But I didn't stop. I went straight to my apartment, shut the door, and finally let myself breathe. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the quiet settle around me. Then I sat down at my desk, opened the family group chat, and sent the message I had drafted the night before along with the document and audio clip. The effect was immediate. Within 5 minutes, my phone lit up with replies, shocked messages from relatives, some siding with me, some asking my parents what on earth they had been thinking. A few were silent, which said more than words ever could. And then came the calls. First from my mom, then my dad, then my brother. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat back on my nearly empty couch, and waited. Downstairs, the voices got louder, angrier. I heard a chair scrape across the floor, my dad's voice booming, my aunt shouting back. Whatever illusion of control they thought they had was gone now. Later that night, I packed the last of my things into the car, just the essentials I didn't want the movers to handle. When I came back upstairs, I saw that my phone had over 30 missed calls. Half the family had tried to reach me. I put it on silent, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not happy exactly, but free. Tomorrow morning, I would be gone. The next morning was crisp and quiet, the kind of early spring day that feels like a clean slate. I woke up before my alarm, got dressed, and made myself coffee in the near-empty kitchen. There was something deeply satisfying about standing there, knowing that in just a few hours, this space wouldn't belong to me anymore. And that was exactly how I wanted it. At 8:30, I heard movement downstairs. My parents were already up, voices low but sharp. Every so often I caught fragments. Humiliated us last night. Everyone's talking about it. Can't believe he would do that to his own family. It might have bothered me once, but now it just rolled off me like rain on a windshield. At 9 o'clock sharp, the movers arrived. 3 guys with a truck and a quiet efficiency I appreciated. We loaded the boxes quickly, then the furniture, then the last of my clothes. By 10:30, my apartment was completely empty except for the faint outline where my bed had been. My mom came upstairs just as the movers were carrying out the last box. "John," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in months. "We need to talk before you go." I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, and waited. "You didn't have to do it this way," she said. "You could have come to us privately. Now the whole family thinks we're—" "They don't just think," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "They know. Because it's true." Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for the right thing to say, but nothing came. Finally, she tried again. "Can't we start over? You're still our son." I almost laughed at that. Almost. "You had years to treat me like your son," I said evenly. "You chose to treat me like a bank account, like a backup plan you could tap into whenever you wanted. I'm not angry anymore, Mom. But I'm done." Her face crumpled a little at that, but she didn't try to stop me as I locked the apartment door one last time and handed her the key. Downstairs, my dad was waiting by the front door, arms crossed, jaw set like he was ready for a fight. "So that's it," he said. "You think you can just walk out and leave this mess behind for us to deal with?" "Yes," I said simply. He scoffed. "You think you're better than us now? Because you got a new job and a cheap apartment?" I looked him in the eye, calm as ever. "No, I just know my worth now. And I'm not staying where I'm not respected." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, to shout, to drag me back upstairs by sheer force of will. But then he must have seen something in my face, that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a phase, that I was really gone, because he stepped aside without another word. I walked out into the sunshine, got into my car, and drove away. Moving into my new apartment was a whirlwind, but by early afternoon I had the essentials unpacked, my bed set up, my desk in place, my new coffee maker on the counter. I stood by the window for a long time just taking it in, the quiet, the space, the fact that every single thing here was mine. My phone buzzed constantly that day with more calls and messages, but I ignored them until evening. Then, finally, I opened the group chat and sent one last message. "Thanks to everyone who reached out. I'm safe, I'm happy, and I'm moving forward. I won't be attending future family events for a while, and I ask that you respect my space. If anyone still believes this was an overreaction, feel free to look over the documents again and ask yourself if you'd tolerate it happening to you. Take care." The replies came slowly this time. My aunt sent a single word, "Understood." My cousin sent a thumbs-up emoji. My brother left the group entirely, which honestly made me smile. That night, I cooked my first meal in the new place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and a glass of wine, and ate it sitting on the floor by the window. The city lights stretched out around me, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. A week later, I heard from my cousin again. Apparently, the fallout from my reveal hadn't stopped. The family had split into 2 camps. Those who were furious at my parents for what they'd done, and those who were furious at them for letting it get public. My dad's reputation had taken a hit. Several friends at his club confronted him about the family money comments, and he had been noticeably more withdrawn since. My mom tried to call me once more, leaving a long voicemail about how she hoped we could mend things someday. I listened to it once, deleted it, and didn't call back. I wasn't doing this to punish them forever, but I also wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of thinking they could win me back with a few sweet words and no accountability. Instead, I poured my energy into building the life I had always wanted. I decorated the apartment, hosted a few friends over for dinner, even started dating again. The new job was challenging but exciting, and when the promotion finally came through, I treated myself to something I'd been dreaming about for years. A small but beautiful used car that was fully mine, no shared keys, no notes on the windshield. The first time I drove it past the marina where the family boat was docked, I didn't stop. but I did allow myself a small smile. They had their boat. I had my freedom. And freedom, I realized, was worth every cent they had taken from me, because I had rebuilt it stronger, smarter, and completely out of their reach. I didn't look back as I merged onto the highway, the city skyline ahead of me glowing in the fading light. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving my family. I was living, and they couldn't take that away from me again. And that was my final thought as I turned up the music, rolled down the window, and let the wind carry me forward into a life that was fully mine.